Welcome to My Daily Thread. It's a great little place to get a snippet of wisdom from the yoga and the meditation masters to start or to end your day. I'm Jeff Lichty. All right, welcome everyone. Welcome to the show. Thanks for coming on. This is a special moment again where I get Dr. Paul back in my sights, and I'm loving it, Dr. Paul Bramadat is, well, I'm going to let him describe what he is because he is now the best-selling author of the book called Yogalands. He's laughing a little bit in the background. It's been released 1 month, but I'm saying it is a bestseller, and I really would encourage anyone who's listening who's interested in yoga to have a read through the book Yogalands. I don't think we're going to even have the video, but nonetheless, there's the book in if this video gets out somewhere. Paul, maybe you can let's just rewind back to how did you get into yoga? Well, first off, what's your role at the university? Just as a reminder for people who, it's your second time on the show. I love having you here, mate. As always, good friend and also, sharp academic scholar. It's great for me to listen to the way that you present all ideas. So give us the update. How did you get into yoga? What are you doing at the center? Who are you? And how are you exiting to become the best-selling author of everything yoga?
Wow, what an introduction. So yeah, I'm Paul Bramadat, and I'm the director of the Center for Studies in Religion and Society at the University of Victoria. And I'm a professor of religious studies by day. I would say that my kind of orientation is sociological, anthropological. I study anytime religion kind of makes it into the public arena. So anytime your weird uncle might say something about religion or spirituality, or anytime somebody dies or kills for religious or spiritual reasons, you know it, man. And so anytime a religion becomes a topic of public debate. So what I don't do ancient texts, ancient languages. I don't dig things up out of the ground. I study real people in the contemporary world, and I try to take seriously what animates them. So, and I've been the director for 17 years of the center. That's coming to an end in July. And this book that you're talking about, so it's called Yogalands: In Search of Practice on the Mat and in the World. And it just came out in April from McGill University Press. And it's it's my favorite book or any kind of writing of my whole life. So
yeah, that's amazing because you have written many books.
Mhm.
Just a rewind. So, I mean, because Paul won't ever toot his own horn, so I'll just like honk a little there for a minute. When people have big problems where religion is intersecting with real life, like let's say vaccines, people would come and consult you, or sometimes security groups, big international security groups would consult you based on, some kind of movement that's happened, some kind of radical, maybe, I don't know what you'd even call it, but a radical extreme group of any kind, of any flavor, would make a move in the world, and they would come in, they would get your consult on that. And so how did you transfer from this sort of part of the academic world slash, almost really, I mean, when you think about it, these are very, very modern topics. I mean, vaccines, and then obviously the wars that are always going around, religious wars of whatever kind, and then that's an ongoing thing, and that's not going away probably. But then how did you get into the yoga world?
I got into the yoga world in kind of the same way so many of us do. I got into it by way of physical crisis. So my body broke down, and then I ended up at your Shala in Victoria. But in terms of this being an academic topic for me, or sort of an intellectual curiosity for me, I really intended to, start yoga really as a kind of a Indian flavored physiotherapy. That was what I had in mind. And I didn't want anything to do with I didn't want to apply my academic analysis to what I was doing in the yoga studio. That I was just really there to fix my knees. But then the problem
Right.
is, you stick around long enough and you start to pull little threads, and you start pulling one thread and you keep pulling it and everything unwinds. And then you see that underneath the surface of this map, so to speak, is all these other dynamics: religious dynamics, political dynamics, social dynamics, sexual, gender dynamics. All that stuff is there. So all the other topics I've been looking at throughout my whole career, whether it's issues around public safety or gender or ideas of what health is and what wellness is, all of these issues, which are issues I've written about quite a bit, came to the surface, and I saw that I could look at all these issues still through the lens of a yoga studio. Because as I said, I'm an anthropologist by heart, or a sociologist by heart. And so I'm quite happy going into a shopping mall or a bar or a restaurant or a university classroom or a yoga studio and seeing that as a kind of a microcosm of a larger set of social processes. And that's kind of what I'm trying to do, is to go into a space like a yoga studio and say, like, what's going on here? What are all these people doing in this space? And initially, I was in that space just to fix my body and allow myself to be able to walk, around the block. And
Right.
you and your other teachers solved that problem for me. But then the other set of questions that I like to pose about spirituality and secular culture, or religion and secular culture, or the way in which Western people use Eastern or Asian ideas. So all
Right.
of these interests that I've had for a long, long time, all of a sudden they kind of landed in a yoga studio. And I saw that I could use a yoga studio to address all these bigger questions. And so that
Right.
was really the wonderful convergence of the kind of personal, physical stuff for me, and then the intellectual stuff. But then, of course, a few years later, then it became my own, I would say, spiritual path as well.
Right. And so then you've spoken to me, and also part of the research was the whole idea of the insider versus, I guess, the outsider. Can
Yeah.
you explain to us what that is? I mean, most of us listening on the podcast, I don't think are academics who would understand this languaging. Could you kind of help me out with that?
Yeah, yeah, totally. So, for a long time in academic research, the preference was to strive for objectivity, so that when you're describing the way women and men interact, when you're describing the economics, system of Lithuania, when you're talking about rap music, whatever the object of your study is, you should study it from the outside. So you should study it dispassionately. And, I think in the last 30 or 40 years, academics have come to see that that's actually not possible in any absolute way. That in some sense, who you are as a scholar, whether you're white, black, rich, poor, woman, man, whatever it might be, these identities always influence the thing you're studying and the thing you're writing about. And so I kind of leaned into that insight. So there's now a
Right.
greater, I guess I would say, a greater tolerance for people writing themselves into their research. So
Okay. Yeah.
if you're an African American woman and you're studying poverty, or you're studying images of women in the United States, it's okay to say, I am an African American woman and I bring that perspective and that rich set
Oh,
of
I see. Yeah.
insights and intuitions to this topic. And in my
Right.
case, I'm a half Indian guy. My father was Indo-Trinidadian, and I'm a scholar of religious studies. So it makes no, and I'm a person who had a physical crisis that yoga kind of fixed, I guess I would say. So it makes no sense to pretend those identity markers, being half Asian myself, being kind of fixed by yoga in some sense, and being a kind of a lover of yoga as sort of spiritual, philosophical, psychological analysis. It made no sense to pretend that wasn't the case.
Right. Of course. Now so the research that you did, so it's not a sabbatical because you weren't on a sabbatical. You were actually on a research project that got funded. And then tell us what you did with it and how the book then came about. Because I mean, we talked about that last time, but the book hadn't been published. And in fact,
Mm.
you wouldn't release to us what the name was. I think you knew that it was Yogalands, but maybe can you give us a brief background on what you did, and then how did you guys land on the name Yogalands, and why is that important?
Yeah, I'll go backwards actually, because in fact, I think the last time I talked to you, what I thought the name of the book was "The Body Settles the Score,"
Right. Yeah, we
and
talked about that.
I was totally championing that title to the press, but the press felt that "The Body Settles the Score" was too linked to the idea of the body keeps the score,
Yeah,
which of course
Vanderkolk.
is
Yeah.
Bessel van der Kolk's book,
Yeah.
and that was intentional. I mean, certainly, I have a chapter named "The Body Settles the Score."
Right.
But in the end, I went through a million conversations with the press and we landed on Yogalands. And the reason for that is that I'm trying to identify or sort of suggest that there is a kind of a world in which yoga students and scholars and teachers move. And that world consists of, of course, places in India, so Goa, Rishikesh, Mysore,
Sure.
Pune, whatever, but also yoga studios in North America, right? Just like yours, but
Yeah.
also even people's, rec room where they have a space where they put their mat every morning.
Yeah.
These are kind of imagined, created spaces, and we kind of move within it. And so people might go for a yoga retreat or a yoga workshop or whatever. So I'm trying to identify kind of a imagined world that people move within, and you kind of know when you're in that world and then when you leave that world, right? So a
Right.
yoga, in some sense, I describe the yoga world as kind of like an anti-world. So you have the world outside the yoga studio, which is loud, fast, and dirty, and you have a world inside a yoga studio, which teachers create as slow, calm and quiet.
Right.
And that's a really important distinction for me, because I think Yogalands consists of this kind of space you can move within, from your home studio to your studio in your city to India, and that creates a kind of a space in the imagination and a space in
Yeah.
actual geography.
Yeah, and Yoga Lands then applies to whatever space you find yourself in with your practice. And do
Yeah,
you
whatever
find
space you
that
make for yourself.
right? Like, I mean, you can make that space for yourself as
Yeah,
well, which is
wherever you are.
probably eventually the most important thing
Exactly.
to learn. Really,
Yeah, yeah,
how in fact do you make that space for yourself every day? Can you set up,
yeah,
even if it's in the corner of your room, just your yoga lands, and that yoga lands in your bedroom or in some?
totally.
I mean, I know some people who would meditate in their closets. They would just move some clothing aside and then sit in their closet because it was the most peaceful place they could find in their homes. So
Well,
that
yeah,
would
that's one of the
be
things.
considered a yoga lands as well. Is that what you're
Totally.
saying? Yeah.
That's yeah, absolutely, and that's one of the things I think you taught all of your students, is that even Surya Namaskara A and B, for example, and then the three closing postures, that
Right.
you can travel with, right? So you've got
Yeah.
terrible jet lag, you've got a 3 day conference in Germany, but then you have to come right back, so it's terrible on the body. But you have this portable practice that you've learned from a
Right.
good teacher, and
Right.
that it can stabilize you. And
Right.
originally when I went out into the field for the research period, I was going to
Right.
be just contrasting American and Canadian yoga studios. That was the
Right.
plan.
Yeah.
And then, as an anthropologist, sociologist, you go out and do that. You go out and start talking to people, hanging out in their spaces, just observing how things are going, interviews, you do surveys, whatever, you do all that stuff. And you start asking questions about Canada versus the United States. And I have a chapter on that.
Right.
But it wasn't really the core issue. The core issue was really physical suffering.
Right. Right.
That was really, in some sense, the through line. That the kind of national differences, they were interesting, but the real through line was the body.
And so the body then settles the score. I mean, that's one of your
Mhm.
chapters, but the body settling the score because it whatever is plaguing us from our life is showing up in the body. Would you say it's showing up in the body first, or does it show up in the mind, or is it a chicken and the egg thing? Like, did you make a distinction between is this the body or is this the mind as well, or both? Like you had said
Yeah,
body a couple times.
I don't really make a clean distinction between mind and body. I
Okay.
and I don't think Patanjali did either. I
No,
mean,
no, no, definitely not.
right. So, and I'm so in some sense reflecting that Indic view of the mind and body being part of the same entity.
Got it. Okay. Yeah,
They're all
got it.
part of Prakriti. To put it in
Yeah.
Patanjali's context.
Right.
So, yeah. So, I think for most of us, it lands in our body, understood broadly to contain our brains, minds, thoughts, as well as our elbows and skin.
But bottom line is that there's suffering, and then the suffering drives people to their yoga lands.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
Right.
The suffering drives us to seek some kind of wholeness, consolation, some kind of reprieve from some kind of a space, the outside world, which I think is increasingly hostile, increasingly dangerous.
Right.
And yoga creates this kind of safe space that is portable, safe, set aside. That 12 square feet of mat, that
Right.
is its own little world, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Sure can be, can't it?
yeah.
What would you say were the major differences, if you could point out one or two, between the American and the Canadians in the yoga lands? American
Sure.
Canadian yoga lands.
Yeah, that's right. I think probably the main one worth observing is just the different attitude toward health, right?
Mm.
You think about the American context, even people I met who had really good healthcare insurance, like they
Right.
worked at a university or they worked in healthcare themselves, and they had what they thought to be really good healthcare insurance policies. They nonetheless always lived in fear that they would twist their ankle on the wrong day of the week, or they would twist their ankle when they weren't near a hospital that was in their coverage zone. One woman said her dad basically took a year off of his job because she had cancer, and he had to kind of manage all of the treatment, but also especially the relationship with the bean counters in the insurance company.
Wow.
And when she
Like
when she told me
the,
the story,
yeah.
when she told me
Yeah.
the story, I said, "Did you have a really strange kind of cancer, like where you had to convince people that this was worth treating?" She said, "No, no, I had a totally normal cancer, nothing strange about it at all. But my dad just had to do all the in between work." So, and we heard story after story after story when we did our research in the United States of people who again thought they had great coverage, and then all of a sudden a bill for 50 grand would come because
Wow.
they had deductibles and they maxed out this, or their son also had to have some kind of treatment, and
Oh
so
gosh. Right.
capped them out. So in the United States, I think there's a greater tendency for yoga to be perceived. I don't want to overstate the differences, but for yoga to be perceived as a bit more of a health intervention.
Right.
Whereas I think in the Canadian context, it's a bit more of a kind of a sort of a life enhancing wellness intervention. Again, I don't want to overstate the distinction, but I
Of
think
course. Sure.
it's
Sure.
meaningful because Canadians, you don't think, hey, if I twist my ankle getting off the bus, I'm gonna have to sell my house.
Right.
Whereas
Yeah.
Americans, that's a thing that could happen. There's tons of medical bankruptcy in the United
Well, and
States.
in the United States, isn't bankruptcy due to medical uh, inability to pay medical bills? Isn't that one of the leading causes of bankruptcy there? I think,
Yeah,
isn't it?
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. It's a pervasive problem. And just one little story that captures this.
Yeah.
This was at one of our research sites in Indianapolis, and somebody was telling me this story about how she or they left Hawaii to move to Indianapolis. And
Right.
when I said, "Oh, that seems," did you have friends here, or was there a really great job? Why did you move from this paradise space to? And they clearly loved Hawaii. They moved from this paradise space to Indianapolis, which is, it's a lovely space, but it's not Hawaii.
Right.
And they said, well, my medical insurance just kept going up and up and up. And that was really just the only direction it was going to go. They were self-employed as a yoga teacher, actually. And
Wow.
so they said, well, my partner got a job offer in Indianapolis, which had full medical coverage for both of us. And so we left. And
Wow.
all the Americans in this focus group that I had pulled together, they all kind of just went, "Yep, that's a thing."
Yeah. Okay. That's
And
right. Like
and
nod in their
and I
head,
just
like
said,
this is everyday existence, like that.
"Yeah."
Wow.
And I just said, just so you know, just out of if you're curious, in Canada, this kind of story, you wouldn't say I moved, for healthcare coverage,
No.
um,
No.
unless you had a
That
very
doesn't
weird,
even,
like maybe if you lived in Churchill and you had a very strange, a very unusual health problem, you might move to Winnipeg because that's kind of
because it's
you need to be near a hospital.
a
But
tertiary
they
care
were just talking
center or
about
some
money.
kind
Yeah,
of research hospital that could specialize in this ultra specific diagnosis that is very difficult to understand. Hold on one
yeah.
second. I gotta take a little picture of us online here because I think it's really important for us to realize that occasionally we do enjoy these moments, and there it is. Yeah. But So this, would you say that the thing that strikes me with that though, Paul, is that fear is the driver there, right? Like
Mhm.
there's a fear of losing what you have. And so yoga is a means to battle with your fear or manage your fear. Or would you, is that inaccurate? Whereas
No,
I
not
don't
at all.
think that's the case in Canada. You see, I think in Canada, very often, from what I can see, is that it can easily slide into the realm of the alternative fitness. That's what yoga can be. Yoga posture practice, obviously, here can be. And I think that's, would I be wrong with that distinction? I mean, I haven't been to the States and I really don't,
Yeah,
or is it an oversimplification?
that's yeah. I mean, I think it's a bit of an oversimplification. I don't mean that critically, but
No, 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 of
I
course.
I think I think that the tendency to see yoga as principally a fitness intervention, that you see that on both sides of the border. It's
Okay.
just that
Yep.
in the States, the idea of yoga as a means of keeping you out of the hospital system, out of the medical system, is a bit more prevalent.
Right. Okay.
And when we did this international survey comparing American and Canadian perceptions of yoga, and I think it was something like 6% of Canadians said that they were unhappy with the Canadian healthcare system, and something like, oh, I want to say 75 or 80% of Americans said that they were unhappy.
Wow.
Yeah. So,
Wow.
so if you
That's
can
stunning.
have,
Yeah.
yeah, if you can have a mat where for that hour or 2 hours or 30 minutes or whatever it might be, you have a sense of control, of ease, of comfort, and of strengthening. So you have both strengthening as well as
Yeah.
comfort.
Yeah.
It has that profound capacity then to provide a space of solace and protection and control. And I think people in Canada and the United States appreciate that. But in the United States, I think it has these almost prophylactic qualities, right? The quality of keeping you out of future trouble.
Right. Yeah. 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 Okay. Hey, can we move on for some? I mean, I want to
Mhm.
move on. I want to move on away from like the politics of healthcare in our countries. But this y- because you're a religious studies professor or you run a religious studies institute, center.
Yep.
Can you how because and you have a chapter called religionish,
Mhm.
in the book. How does yoga fit with in the new world of religion that we've in our modern context, right? I mean, you and I have spoken before about how SBNR is a category, and I had to explain this to my yoga teacher training students here last weekend, where I'm like, there's an actual category now of thought where it's spiritual but not religious. Would you did you talk to anyone across the board about this and the idea of religionish? I know there's could you just talk a little bit about how religion is intersecting with yoga and spiritual not religious and anything that you can kind of shed some light on there because I'm this is my jam. I'm kind of curious about all this.
Yeah. Yeah, one of the things you'll always hear at yoga studios is that yoga is spiritual, but it isn't or doesn't have to be religious, right? That's a very common thing you hear.
Right.
Um, and people will say that while they're standing right in front of a statue of Shiva or
Of
Ganesh,
Ganesha. Yeah, right.
and they'll say that right before they do a Sanskrit invocation, which
Right.
combines texts from almost 1,000 years ago. So
Right.
they'll do that, maybe even when a guru is in a framed picture on the wall. So they'll say all these
Right.
things that this has nothing to do with religion. Oh, and then they'll have Bhagavad Gita and Yoga Sutras study groups, right? So
Right.
I'm not in the business of saying this absolutely is religion. You have to treat it like religion. It's religion. That's clearly not the case.
No.
Because why do I know it's not the case? Because that's what people say. So, however, what happens in a person's mind when they're about to do the Sanskrit invocation, when they're standing beside Shiva or Ganesh, when there's a framed picture of the guru on the wall. They maybe have mala beads around their neck. They
Right.
maybe have tattoos,
Right.
of
Yeah.
various kinds of Indic symbols.
Lots of
So what
yeah,
happens in
lots
a
of
person's
Sanskrit.
mind? when they do that stuff and then say that it's not religion, what's happening is that it's a reflection of our culture's views on religion, right? So the SBNR category that sociologists and anthropologists use, spiritual but not religious, what it is it's a new approach to thinking about these resources. So now the Gita, the Yoga Sutras, Malabeads, statues of Ganesh, Shiva, etc. These are resources that people can use in new ways, right? So you can be a Christian, and it's no problem to do, I shouldn't say it's no problem, but it's not much of a problem to do yoga and be a Christian.
My mom, it might be a problem, but anyways.
Yeah, I actually have a PhD student whose PhD topic is Christian yoga. It's fascinating.
Whoa.
So that's another topic, but and she'd be a really good guest. She's brilliant. But
okay.
So I use the term religion-ish to sort of remind people that, hey, these symbols, the Malabeads, the Sanskrit, the Yoga Sutras, these pieces are religious pieces from Hinduism mostly, but also some Buddhism, some Jainism. Right. So these are elements of Indic religious traditions that get selectively rewoven together into what we find in a yoga studio. And my job as a scholar is just to be curious about that, to draw people's attention to it, not to be preachy. I have no interest in that at all. But to simply say, hey, you're a person of no fixed address religiously, or maybe you're even Christian. Maybe you're just an Easter and Christmas Christian, but you're maybe nominally Christian, or you are SBNR, or you're Muslim, and you're in this yoga studio. How are you making sense of the ways in which this teacher is kind of carefully, selectively reweaving together all these different religious fabrics? And I think it's actually quite creative, and I've been in lots of studios where they keep it very Indic, and they make sure the Sanskrit pronunciation is correct. And then other studios where the Indic quality of it is a kind of that people give a nod to it, but they're not that serious about it. So there's a whole range of approaches.
Well, then this sort of comes to the idea of appropriation of this kind of knowledge, right? I mean, what maybe you can talk about that. Like, what's the problem with appropriating knowledge? Is there a problem with it?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I think when I went into the field and I started asking people precisely that question, Jeff, I said, like, how does this work for you as a white yoga teacher in Winnipeg or wherever you happen to be, and you're teaching this Indic tradition mostly to other white people? So how does that work for you? Do you feel uncomfortable? Do you feel guilt? Or do you feel like maybe it's inappropriate? Most of them said, no, I'm good. And so they each had different explanations for why they were kind of okay with it. But the problem with appropriation, of course, is the idea that a more dominant culture, or a person from a more dominant culture, is looking at the resources of a more peripheral culture, or a culture that has less power, and they're selectively taking pieces that are useful to them without acknowledging, without paying, without giving any tribute of any kind to the community from which it's derived. And I've seen that done well. I've seen people really try to honor the Indic roots of postural yoga, and I've seen people do it very poorly, where they don't acknowledge it at all, where they mispronounce everything, where they put tattoos on their, sacred tattoos on their feet. You and I have seen it done poorly, but it can be done very well. And so I don't think a white person using Indic ideas or images or languages or whatever, I don't think it's inherently a problem. I think it's just a problem if they don't make any effort to give an acknowledgement of the origins of these things, or to pay respect to it. And I think yoga lineages. Go ahead.
This is a bit of a side note, because Pete and I were talking about this. Is this part of the woke thing? What is the woke? What is this whole woke thing that this is a real aside. We can skip it. Should we skip it? You're like, I'm looking at you. I'm like, give me like the Cole's notes on what woke is, and then let's just skip past it, because it kind of goes with this appropriation thing, does it not? Or can we just
kind of? I mean, no, we can do it. It's just that that takes the conversation in a very different direction, because woke is often used by reactionary, or often kind of right of center people, to refer to any effort on the part of left of center people to draw attention to a history of violence or misrepresentation or
Oh,
appropriation or
got it.
whatever.
Okay, yeah, yeah.
So,
Oh,
but
I get you.
it's
I
often
get you. No, no,
used.
let's no. I don't want to go. I don't want to go there
Yeah,
today. That's a conversation for a different time.
yeah.
But with the religionish stuff, then would you say that there's what's the takeaway that you got from the whole thing? Like, is it a net positive, or is it a net negative, or is it like just very neutral, and it's just everyone on their own, everyone's on their own page and they have to figure it out for themselves?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I mean, I guess I feel that, people come to yoga studios mostly because of brokenness of some kind, physical,
Right,
emotional, spiritual
right,
brokenness, and they're finding something there. And
right,
the religion-ish quality of those spaces seems to be fairly important, because of course people
right.
could just go to a gym, they could just go to
Yeah,
Pilates classes, they could go to a physiotherapist, they could go to lots of other
right,
places, or they could just get things online. So they're getting something from it. So for me, it's a net positive, and then I see my job and the job of the book, of Yogalands, to be getting people to be a bit more aware and maybe a bit more curious about all the things that they see in a yoga studio, so that what
right,
things they might not even have noticed. So incense, or what Malabeads, or why are there 108
right,
Malabeads, right?
right,
What is this thing, the Yoga Sutras and the Bhagavad Gita?
right,
Who brought this kind of yoga into North America? So they get just a bit more curious about it, so that maybe that allows them to have a
right,
more, like a richer yoga experience.
right. And would you say that overall, in all of the research that you've done now, because this is like it's very extensive. You did what, 650 interviews or something? Like it was a ton of
650
ton
people,
of
yeah, 650 people in the survey, and then I visited 7 cities in North America. I did 113 long, like 2-hour interviews, and then I
wow.
went to
Yeah.
65 classes, and I did a teacher training program, and then I've been teaching
Right.
about yoga at the university for, I think, 4 years, and yeah, so I've done a lot of
Right.
this
Right.
kind of
Right. So
immersion,
that's
and
quite a
not just
lot.
Ashtanga.
Yeah. Right. Of course. Would you? So, how has this affected you personally?
Hmm. Yeah, to be
Just like
honest, no, it's a good question.
get right to the
Yeah,
right to the
yeah,
bottom.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like how's it affected you personally? Because that's a very interesting. That's the piece that I'm like. What's the quality at the end of this? Like,
Yeah.
are we even are we getting anywhere with this?
Yeah. Well, you know what? I'll answer that, and I'll answer that in two ways. First of all, I'll say
Okay.
what I was worried about. I was really worried that this thing that had been so useful, so valuable, so meaningful for me. I loved the people. I loved everything about it. Basically, what I was worried about was that once I started studying it like an academic, that it would wreck it,
Right.
that it would be a total
Right.
buzzkill
Yeah. Of
of the
course.
experience. So I went into the
Right.
thing thinking, because there are a lot of people, for example, who would love reading novels, and they go to
Right.
university and they become an English professor, or they get a degree in English, and then they hate reading
They don't want
because
to read anymore. It's
they don't
like
want to
give
read
me a
anymore, because
like bring Netflix on, maybe. Let's
yeah,
go.
because their professors have trained them to think about reading in a very analytical, and they lose the pleasure of reading. So that's what I was worried about. Okay,
Okay.
and then it's actually had the exact opposite effect. So this long
Oh,
study
good.
that I did
Oh,
of
beautiful.
Yogalands has really enriched my practice. Also, it's enriched I guess I would say, my spiritual life. It's really rooted me in the sort of yogic tradition, in the texts, the
Yeah.
ideas, the people.
Yeah.
Of course,
Yeah.
you see things you don't like, right? You're going to definitely see
Of
things you don't
course.
like. So it's
Yeah.
clarified some of those for sure. It's clarified some of those, but it has also clarified the value. And so, for example, I think I mentioned that I did a teacher training program toward the
Right.
end of my research period. And I didn't really have much intention of teaching when I took the program. I was just doing it for
Right.
research.
Yeah.
But
Of
then I
course.
got out the other end of the program, and I thought, I don't think I'm going to teach. I just wanted to have this experience.
Yeah.
And then I got asked to teach, and then I taught, and I just loved it. I just feel
Yeah.
so privileged to be able to pass this on to other people. And it's one of my favorite things I do all week is
Well, and
teach
I mean,
yoga.
I mean, you would have so much to offer in so many ways, both from a the cultural perspective and background as a sociologist, but also from a practitioner who was wounded and basically the wounded warrior. Like now,
Mm-hmm.
like that
Mm-hmm.
now we're moving past the knees and we're moving into like a strong physical body, and you can be a very great source of light for people that need hope.
Mm-hmm.
Really, isn't it a lot of it? It's like, let's get some hope.
Yeah,
That hope.
yeah. Because I mean, some people go to yoga classes just to be stronger and have a nicer, bum or abs or whatever. Like I guess that's a thing for people.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
I and
Yeah.
and like you, I feel like weaving in the physical discipline and the value of the discipline for your body aesthetically or just health wise, that's good. But I weave that in with a bigger story about what we're all doing here, about suffering in general. I don't get too
Right.
preachy, and I try to keep it
Yeah.
lighthearted as you do in your teaching. And so I really do use you as kind of my model when I'm teaching.
Oh
Is
no. Yeah. Oh,
sorry.
everyone's in trouble. So much
No, but
trouble.
I think one thing a good teacher does is he or she installs windows into a practice. So, yes, I'm going
Right.
to teach you how to do Trikonasana safely, and so it looks right and it feels right and it's good for your
Sure.
body. I can do that. But as I'm weaving the class together from beginning to end, I install little windows about this word or that word, or how to get through difficult things. What the
Right.
yoga tradition of Patanjali or the Gita or whatever it might be, what the yoga tradition teaches us about how to deal with adversity and suffering.
Right.
Um, yeah,
What would you say was the what of what's the most surprising thing that came out of the whole research, and even the whole, I mean, that's like a not a small project, man. That is
mm,
like full on dedication to get the book out, to write the book, to even name the book. I mean, like, I know how much work that was to get to Yogalands. So what what was really surprising to you from all of the work around the book?
yeah. I think what was maybe surprising was how eager people were to talk about their experiences and how open they were to talk about their trauma, because
Wow.
trauma and the sort of suffering body was that through line. And so
Wow.
I really
Yeah.
didn't, I mean, I would just find myself after, conversation after conversation during all these interviews and all the field work, conversation after conversation about addiction, suicide, poverty, um, divorce, all the tumult that we all experience in our lives, or that many of us experience,
Yeah.
um, and and just sort of being able to kind of hold space and bear witness to this suffering. I found it a
Right.
very humanizing experience. I didn't expect it to show up in basically every single interview. I didn't go.
Wow.
I wasn't hunting for it. I wasn't hunting for it. But when I said to
Right.
people, sort of as you did, "Hey, what brought you here? You're a yoga teacher, or
Right.
you're a practitioner. You've been a
Right.
practitioner for like 10, 15, 20 years. What's the deal? What brings you here?" And inevitably you're going to get back to a car accident, or cancer, or suicide of a dear friend, or whatever. There's almost always, sometimes it's just like in my case, arthritis, but very severe arthritis.
Right.
But you'll always have this experience of and the story of adversity. That was something that
It's
surprised
fascinating,
me.
isn't it? It's like that. It's the origin story of suffering, isn't it?
Mm,
It's like
hmm.
everyone's origin story of. I mean, I'm trying to think. I mean, I guess that's what it was for me too.
Sure it was. I've
Like
heard your story
I
enough
was
times.
suffering for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, you were.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's truly it. That's so interesting.
And
Hmm.
can you create a space in a yoga class where a person who's had the car accident, or the addiction, can see in the medic, or it can see in my arthritis, or my history of race issues, can you see in that some kind of common experience of suffering,
Right. Right.
and then be in the same place supporting one another, and that's really the goal.
Right. What do you think the teaching is at the end of this? Like what is it that you want people to know the most from this journey? Like what would you teach people? Like what is the the one or two things that really you would like to leave with the world with this project?
Mm. I guess there are really three things. One is
Okay.
that, you know, I think it's possible to study something that you love without ruining it, but
Mm.
not without changing it. So if you dive deeply into some topic that you have an initial enchantment with the topic, you dive deeply into it. You're not going to ruin it, but you're not going to leave it unchanged. The
Yeah,
next thing is
sure.
that there's a ton of criticisms of yoga out there in the popular arena, that it's patriarchal, consumerist. It leads to body dysmorphia.
Right.
It distracts you from terrible political, economic injustice. So there's all those critiques. So, and I take those critiques very seriously in the book. And yet, yoga survives. In fact, it thrives in many ways. And so
Mhm.
I think the practices speak to a lot of people in a lot of ways, and we need to train ourselves to be open to as many stories as possible, not just, oh, it's all about capitalism, or, oh, it's all about beautiful, thin 34-year-olds, and
Right.
making other people feel terrible. So you can pay attention to those things, that's fine, but it's also about all these other things as well. And then
Right.
really the third thing is that if you even if you're not a practitioner of yoga or you're not a teacher of yoga, you can see in a yoga studio or in the yoga phenomenon in the broader scale, you can see in those things, those things are kind of little microcosms of much broader social processes. So if you want to understand capitalism better, yoga is a good place to do that. If you want to understand gender better,
Interesting.
yoga is a good place to do that. If you want to understand the way we think about Asia, yoga is a good place to look for that kind of
Wow. Right.
example. So, yeah,
Right.
those are probably the three main takeaways.
Oh man, that's amazing. Well, listen, I'm conscious of the time, and I've taken 45 minutes of your time already, so I feel like that's probably a great note to kind of shut it down on. Now, where can people get the book? Let's get to brass tacks. Where do you want people to buy the book? Hey,
Yeah,
and
I
can
mean,
they get a signed copy from you? That's what we should do. I should make this
there.
like a little thing. I'm gonna someone send me a good question, a comment for Dr. Paul, and I'll see if I can get him to write you a personalized book.
I'd be very happy to
Anyways,
do that.
and
You can buy the book through any bookstore. I'm not sure how many
okay,
are on the shelves right now, but if you're in the
okay,
States, Barnes and Noble. If you're in Canada, Indigo, Chapters, Kohl's.
okay,
You
great.
know, in the States, it's all over the place. But I'll go any online. You can even buy it on Amazon.
But is it at the airport yet? Because that's really where brass tacks, man.
I don't know. I'm going to go through the airport in a few weeks,
Yeah,
and I'm
let's have a
quite
look for it.
curious.
I want to see.
I
I'm going to
I
be there
doubt it's
too.
there yet. I doubt it's there yet.
Oh, I look forward to seeing it. Okay, so they can just grab it, and they can grab it online. I'm sure. I guess
Yeah, yeah.
that's what
And
you said. Yeah,
the
of
press
course.
is McGill Queen's University Press. You could also just Google Bramadat and Yogalands, and you'll find it in lots of different places.
Oh, fantastic. Well, Paul, I tell you what. I mean, it is always my distinct pleasure to chat with you and have you on the show. And I know there'll be a repeat somewhere down the line. I'm sure because I always need wisdom and good insight. So you always bring that to us, and you are much appreciated, my man. I'm glad that the bestseller is out, and this is like a new career path. I think for you, we're gonna
It is.
see the best-selling author, and we'll take
Well,
it
and the
from
weird
there.
thing, of course, is that it's the fact that you're interviewing me is quite appropriate, because this wouldn't have happened without you being the kind of teacher you are. Because when I first hobbled into that studio, in 2013, if I had met almost any other person, I might have just gone once and gone home.
Yeah,
But you immediately saw my knees, because we're about the same age, and you immediately saw
right.
what was happening in me. And without that kind of warm reception and that kind of intelligent engagement, I'm not sure I would have stayed, and therefore the book wouldn't be written.
Well, I appreciate that. I'm happy to have been part of the journey for this book. So,
Yeah.
okay, my man. Well, thanks so much for your time. And to everyone out in Yogalands, enjoy your practice. Get on your mat, listen to the thread, have a good read of the book, and we'll catch up with you on another date. Om, peace out.